Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry havoc, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
Val also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I won't.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for while you can, little boy.
Great Scott. Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass! I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Al.
What about side by side with a friend?
The day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
You know, I think I could have cropped the top of the thumbnail there just a little bit on this poster cut. I could have cropped that down a little bit. Anyway,
Maybe.
yeah, the little white space is bothering me. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Saturday Night Driving, where we sit back, relax, talk some movies, and engage in solid discussion, because I think we're going to have a solid discussion tonight. Because this was a bit of a interesting movie. I won't say I was completely thrilled, but it generated some thoughts, and I do have some thoughts. But first of all, Jed, hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this movie because I figured you wouldn't love it or anything, but I figured you'd have a lot of interesting thoughts on it, and we'd get to have an interesting conversation, debate. It's not necessarily something like, oh, you're debating that it's a bad movie, I'm debating it's a good movie. It's more debating about the ideas presented in the film, and I don't feel like we've done that in a while, at least if at all. So I am excited to be here tonight to see how it turns
Soho
out.
was the last time we did that.
Soho, that might have been the last one, yeah.
Where I wasn't thrilled, but I appreciated what it was doing, and and my objectivity overweighed my overall subjectivity on that one. I kind of already have my score locked in place. We'll see if our discussion can adjust it at all. Anyway, hail and howdy to everybody in the chat across both our chats. We hope you're having a good Saturday. If you are, hit that like button, share the love with us. We would appreciate it. Either way, all right. So, Jed, we are talking Stranger Than Fiction, starring Will Ferrell, Emma Thompson, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Dustin Hoffman. It's had a surprisingly, I don't want to say packed cast, but a more interesting cast than I expected going in.
It definitely had more people in it than I remembered watching this time. Last time
Queen
I watched
Latifah.
Yeah, that one shocked me, and I didn't know who Dustin Hoffman was when I initially watched this, so that one surprised me on this watch. But yeah, Queen Latifah, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think she's probably the worst part of the movie, unsurprisingly. She's not a good actress.
No, she isn't.
She starts out coming into the movie dictating to her boss rules and regulations. That's your boss. Like, yeah, you can be like, all right, I'm not going to accept this, but that's just regular stuff. Instead, she's like, you're basically my employee now. You do what I say. It's like, go fuck yourself.
I mean, Queen Latifah in this was 2005, 6. I was going to say 5. It's 2006. So she transitioned from hip hop to acting in the mid 90s. and she didn't do she completely transitioned. So she had been acting for quite a long time at this point, and she's never been that great. I mean, all you got to know is listen to people who talk about that Equalizer show, the Shequalizer, I think they called it, and apparently it was god awful. I watched Az review it for while he could stand it. It was terrible. It was terrible. She's not a great actress, and she, as far as the cast goes, she is the weakest link. Everybody else does a respectable job, some more so than others. I will give you the points that you were right. Will Ferrell does a good job in this. In fact, I can actually stand him in this movie.
I know that's a big deal for you, and actually a lot
Yeah.
of other people I know who dislike him. They are right with him in this movie, and it's an example of what I see a lot. Is a lot of my favorite movies with famous comedians are when they're in serious roles. For example, Robin Williams, Good Will Hunting, favorite Robin Williams performance. Truman Show with Jim Carrey, exact same thing, and then Will Ferrell with this. It's comedians make great dramatical actors.
When he's not doing Will Ferrell, I can stand him. When he's doing Will Ferrell, I'm yelling all the time. I can't take that because that was pretty much his shtick. I yell a lot and I get angry or confused. And this one, he was still confused, but he wasn't angry and he was subdued.
Yeah, he only yelled a few times, and I think they made sense.
That was the crazy moments. Am I going crazy? And yeah,
I think those moments made sense.
That wasn't Will Ferrell yelling. That wasn't the over the top Will Ferrell type of shtick. So we're already getting into set us up for this movie.
So this film, it's very interesting concept-wise that never really gives a solution to the more fantastical elements of it. But it's about Will
Which
Ferrell's
I'm okay with.
Yeah, that's so am I. It's about Will Ferrell's character, who his name is Harold, and he's just the most boring man possible. He's probably autistic, extremely autistic.
Definitely.
Like he's insanely good at math, but he puts it into his life in really boring ways. Like he's always counting exactly how many brushstrokes he does back and forth and up and down, and his clock is always precisely timed. He times his steps and everything. Like his day is scheduled out to milliseconds and not obvious ones. It's like your break is going to be 30 minutes long. No, it's like 47.25 minutes long, and it's weird.
Coffee break is 4 minutes 53 seconds or whatever it was, and
weird stuff like that. And then he starts hearing this voice narrating his life, and it rightfully so freaks him out. So it sets him on this journey where he's trying to figure out, where is this voice coming from? Is it just in my head? Am I going crazy? Or is the fact that, it's a British woman with way better vocabulary than he has a sign that something else is going on here? And it leads him on this journey to discover he is a character in Emma Thompson's character's new novel that she's in the act of writing. And she has a propensity to kill off her main characters. So.
Yeah, now I think my biggest hangups are in the middle of the second act, and in the third act. There's a couple of inconsistencies that jump out at me. We're going to jump around, guys. You know that's how we do it, because that's where the conversation is going to take us. The first inconsistency that bugged me is when he discovers, and I don't remember Emma Thompson's character's name. I don't remember her name. When they realize when he's in the room with Dustin Hoffman and he hears her in the interview there, and he realizes that's the voice. And Dustin Hoffman says, it can't be. That's an interview from 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure he says that, right? I heard that correctly.
He did say that.
Yet she mentions in that interview that she's currently working on the book that is taking over Will Ferrell's life. And now, listen, we live in the age of George R.R. Martin, who's been working on a book for 12 years now. But yeah, and I know, Jed, one of the reasons I think you did this shit movie because you wanted to, as writers, you wanted us to talk about that concept. To me, yes, have I been working on books for 10 years? But when I'm actually writing the book, I get it done within a year. It gets done boom, bang, pow. I don't spend 10 years
I'm the same way. It took me 3 months to write and edit the book I'm currently working on.
Yeah.
But it happens for some people. He said she hadn't published in a long time, and the publishers were very upset about how long she was taking, to the point where they stuck Queen Latifah on her. So I could see justification for her taking so long. My bigger problem is he just happens to be watching that interview at that time. That's 10 years old. Like, that's where my issues with that scene come in, is the contrivance of he just happens to be listening to the exact author that he needs. But the fact that it takes her 10 years, isn't the issue. It's more he's watching a 10-year-old interview. Why?
Yeah. It's just little inconsistencies and little things that coincide. I know that because of you, I look at coincidences all the time now. I can't help it. And I question, can I stomach it or do I have to question it? I'm usually 50-50 on it. I mean, I was just doing Anime Odyssey with Dermy the other night, Dermy and Static, and we were talking about shows on 100. And the final third act thing is just such a coincidence that I could not ignore it. And I actually made Dermy go, yeah, you're right. And he really loved the show. So it now because of you, that shit jumps out at me all the time when I see it. And is the coincidence logically, is there a logical reason I can think it away, rationalize away, or is it just too And in this one, you've logically explained it, but it still feels coincidental and a little inconsistent.
I have a total problem with the coincidence aspect of.
And my other one's in the third act, but I want to wait till we get there because I don't want to skip over the first 2 acts of the story. I will admit this: for most of the first second act, I was kind of bored watching the movie. I didn't hate the movie. I didn't feel like, oh my god, I'm doing this. I didn't do too many other things. You know, I didn't go to another screen and start diddling around on Twitter or something like that. But my leg was jumping at times, and when my leg unconscious starts jumping, that means I'm kind of waiting for things to pick up. And at nearly 2 hours, I feel as though some of this, I think they could have shaved 20 minutes off this movie here and there, not in one segment, but a couple moments here and there, just to not nearly have it be 2 hours. Because
they do harp on his schedule perhaps too long. I could totally see trimming out about 20 minutes.
Because the third act, frankly, is the best part of the movie. Because things are coming to a head. He has resolved his mundane life. He's accepted the voice in his head. And we see him actually evolve as a character. And you know how I love a good evolution of a character. I like when a character does things instead of just has things happen to them. And yes, and I know that that's the interesting parallel here because we're watching a writer have a character where things are just happening to him. And at one point he stops completely and the world just stops around him until the construction arm of the bulldozer busts through his wall. And then he has to actually not have things happen to him, but actually does things.
The plot's going to move forward no matter what.
Yeah, that's where, and I understand. I understand this movie has a lot of interesting layers to it. It does in terms of the storytelling, a storyteller telling the story, and a story about a storyteller telling a story, but a character having the events happening to him. I get it. It's all there, but I feel at times it's a little heavy-handed.
I could see that. I do want to preface that I didn't mention at the beginning. I don't think this is an incredible movie. Like, I'm not going to be rating this a 9 or anything like that. You'll probably all be surprised about how low my score is. But like you're saying, it asks really fascinating questions for me. And so it leads to thought-provoking things within me rather than just thinking, yeah, this is an incredible piece of media. It's just thought-provoking for me. So I can totally see it being heavy-handed. It does get a little too pretentious, in my opinion. A lot of that stuff didn't necessarily bother me. The pretentiousness came in with Dustin Hoffman. He is the stereotypical college professor who knows a lot about literature, but will never be able to write good literature.
Those so who up can't teach.
That's why I think Emma Thompson's character never really responded to him, because he is so far up his own ass with pretentious literature stuff.
But she does say she loves his letters.
She does like his letters. But yeah, no, just him. Dustin Hoffman serves an important part in the story, but he's constantly saying such pretentious shit that I've met people like him who think about literature in a very pretentious way, and it bothers me a lot. So I think he's, besides, of course, Queen Latifah being completely worthless in the movie and a terrible actress, Dustin Hoffman would be the second character that I would.
But he does a good performance.
He does a good job. He just needs a major rewrite more than anything else, because he ascribes to the philosophy that stories are only either comedies or tragedies, and I feel like that is a thing. That's a thing. It's a little of an archaic perspective.
It's the two faces, the smiley face mask and the sad mask. Yeah.
A lot of it's derived from Shakespeare, because Shakespeare's works are divided up into 3 categories. There's the tragedies and the comedies and the histories. If you're not a history or a tragedy, you just kind of become a comedy. Whereas in the modern day, comedy has become a very specific word. So I feel like it's muddling the waters of understanding to say that there's only those two types of stories, comedies and tragedies, because there's such thing as dramas that aren't necessarily either. And there's so many other options that's where I think his pretentiousness is coming in. He's like, are you a comedy or a tragedy? And Will Smith starts to Will Ferrell starts to fall in love with Maggie. And he's like, it's a comedy. I'm like, God, Dustin Hoffman, it's been so pretentious in you that you're thinking it's a comedy. That's just more personal opinion than anything else when it comes to pretentiousness. It bothers me.
We'll get to the characters, but I want to keep talking about the overall story for a minute here. I feel as though I understand the whole concept of this movie, that even though it's not explained, which I'm okay with, because as usual, we're kind of always in agreement. Not everything always has to be explained. Leave it up to interpretation. That's part of art. That's fine with that. Somehow, Emma Thompson's character, the writer, has tapped into. I mean, the way I looked at it, she has somehow tapped into the human subconscious zeitgeist and is connected with Harold and is somehow writing his life and somehow control of his life through words. And that's why I say there's a lot of layers to this movie, because that's that kind of old type of theme of, if you know somebody's true name, and it's like an old fantasy trope. If you know something's true name, you could take control of it. You can command it, do whatever you want with it. And when you're scribing it, that's even greater control. I don't know if it's the movie's that deep, but that kind of thing, that's how I saw that right there. And she somehow unconsciously does it. And whether at one point she's questioning, have I done this before? Have I done?
Which would be terrifying.
Yes.
As a writer, not necessarily a tragedy writer in the sense that she is, but I put my characters through a lot of shit. That's kind of my staple, is torturing the living hell out of my
misery porn.
Basically, to a certain extent, some of my stuff does fall into that category. So just the idea of like meeting one of my characters someday, I can totally understand why she's emotionally distraught in the third act, realizing the implications. Like, she doesn't struggle with it as much as I kind of wish she would. Like, is he telling the truth or not? She does for like 30 seconds. But as soon as she accepts it, I can totally buy her reaction and think it might be a little bit less than it should be, because I would be freaking out. Just the morality of what you've done to these people.
Also, I mean, as a fantasy writer, science fiction writer myself, part of the ways I've always been able to, I think, do what I do is that somewhere in the back of my mind, I kind of think I've tapped into some alternate dimension and I am seeing these stories and this is happening and I'm affecting it. That's kind of how I get into it when I'm doing it. And if I understand, I pick characters to die. It's like, you're going to live, you're going to die. When I create a character, I know when they're going to live and die. I know their entire history. I've done that. And to think that it would come about that I'm the one that actually made that happen in this world, it would be a little freak out, because like, oh shit, I'm a god, but not really a god, because I am not all powerful, but I've gained control over this soul, and I've written their life, and when I came up with their idea, I slated them to die, and that would be a powerful thing, and they never answer that, and I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
because we shouldn't have all the answers in this thing, especially because the way the movie ends. But either way, so one of the things I felt though, and as I was saying, I know is how this movie is structured to be this author that might have tapped into the ultimate zeitgeist where she controls this dude's soul. I kind of feel like, and this taps into my I think my ultimate criticism in the third act. I think it would have been better if she had just been this omniscient author telling his story, and he sort of knows it's happening, but then never seeks her out and kind of just deals with it. And we're being told his story. And I kind of feel it almost would have worked a slightly differently. And I might have been more interested that way, because for most of the movie, I was failing to connect with Harold because I thought he was a fictional character. And why am I caring about this fictional character who may have suddenly gotten a real self-awareness that he's a character? Why should I care about that? Of course, then third act, oh, you're not a fictional character, you're real, and she's
Mhm.
just doing we have now taken on a slight fantasy aspect of this. Okay, now I am a little more invested. But that was the problem. I was failing to be invested in Harold for most of the movie. And I kept thinking, I kind of like him because he's a dingus, but I'm not rooting for him. And that's a problem I'm having in a lot of things I'm watching at the moment, in privately or for this kind of stuff. I'm having trouble rooting for certain characters because either they aren't appealing to me, or in this case, I thought he was fake for most of the
Mhm.
movie. So I kind
I
of
mean,
feel I go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, no. Go finish your thought.
No, I was gonna round it out saying I kind of feel as though I'm asking too much of the movie by thinking in that way.
Well, what I was going to say is more a question because you started it out saying it would be better if he never met her. So it would have been better if he
What
stayed fate for you to.
I might have understood it a little better because
Mm,
it's jar. If I don't want to say it's jarring, that's the closest word I can think of. That suddenly he is real and he's not fiction, and of course then the title Stranger Than Fiction. Eh, I just felt it took too long for me to connect to him as the
mm,
protagonist of this movie because I didn't feel there were stakes. Because if
mhm,
he was a fictional character, you're just a fictional character. Your stakes are not real. And then by the time there are stakes, I'm this much invested because now my
mhm.
only thought is how there's no way he's gonna die. That's the thing, Jed. Did you when you first saw, did you think he was gonna die in the end?
Mainly because of the pretentiousness of Dustin
Hmm.
Hoffman's character, the way like he was convincing him you had to die for the quality
Hmm.
of the story.
Hmm.
Like I thought it might be the case. I think it works better without him dying
Yeah,
though.
as Emma Thompson was freaking out too much for me to think, oh, he's not gonna die. She's having a moral crisis here, and that's kind of
Mhm.
her character's final point. I want to
She
yeah.
is my favorite character in the story. She's the one that I root for. She's the one that I get invested in, like you're talking about. Will
Uh-huh.
Ferrell, his character is boring on purpose.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
can totally understand having difficulty relating to him. And that's why I relate more towards her, especially as a writer myself. I see a lot of the writer's mentality in her. So I definitely
I
relate to
see
her
some of it.
more. Mm.
We'll dissect her and their portrayal of her as a
Mhm.
writer when we talk about her character. Uh, but yeah, so there it is. That's my biggest problem with the overall structure for the movie. I wasn't invested because I thought he was fictional, and then when he became real, I was so disconnected. I was just my only thing was how are we going to resolve this? How are they
Mhm.
not going to let him die? Because I knew there was no way he was going to die. The too many nice things had been lined up for him, and the stress of tragedy versus comedy or tragedy versus happy ending. I saw the twist coming where she was going to go away from tragedy. I saw that
Mhm.
coming, and it was just okay. How are they going to do it? Because the whole movie, you're watching the black chick who becomes the bus driver and the kid on the bike. They are littered throughout the entire
Mhm.
movie, and my only thought was, are they real? And how do they play out in the end here? What are their significance? And then by the time we're the third around, oh, okay, she's driving the bus, woman driver, by the way. She's driving the bus. You knew I was going to do
Yeah.
that. Woman driver and kid on the bike. It was all lining up. Kid was going
Mhm.
to be the cause of his death. Just was a question how, and she was going to hit him. And
It's a lot of
yeah,
setup and payoff, and that
yeah.
was the whole point of her book is setting up
Mhm,
how the little
mhm,
pieces of his life led to his death, starting with
mhm.
the catalyst, the failure of his watch. Now,
Yeah.
I think there are some problems with the watch,
The
especially with
anthropomorphization of the watch.
yeah, they took it a way too far, at least in
Yeah.
the first act of the movie, mainly. The rest of the movie, I think they do a great job just saying, all right, it failed, but then it ultimately saved his life. That part of it,
That's fine
I'm
with that.
totally good with.
But
It's trying to talk to him.
my problem is they committed so much in the first 20 minutes to the watch being alive and then
Mhm.
abandoned it completely.
Yes, that is definitely a flaw in the movie.
It's you put so much effort into the watch having feelings and emotions and then just whoop. Yep, it now once he resets it, it's not anything except when it lights up to let him know to go chase after Maggie Gyllenhaal. I
Mhm.
mean, and we'll get to that in a second.
It's very inconsistent with the watch. I do
Yeah.
like a lot of the initial voiceover with the
Well, it's
narration with the
setup.
watch.
We like
The
good
setup,
setup. Yeah, world building.
ju
We like world building.
Absolutely. It's just making it alive seemed weird and out of the blue, and it didn't necessarily connect to, like, Rachel saw it for the first time with me yesterday, and she thought the watch being alive would play some role into
So did I.
why Will Ferrell is hearing Emma Thompson's voice in his head. But
Mhm. I thought
ultimately
it would have
that
a bigger
wasn't a
role.
thing.
In the
Mhm.
end, it's the catalyst for an event, and then it's that tiny little thing that saves his life because she uses it as a method of interesting life saving.
Mhm.
And as the doctor says, very cool. I mean, so it worked out. All right, let's go through the characters. We've already mentioned Harold, Will Ferrell's character. As you said, very astutely, purposefully boring.
Mhm.
Definitely autistic. You're not able to instantly calculate a large number, multiplication number like that if you're not autistic. That's just that's how a math wired autistic brain works. Oh yeah, got it. And when you're and it is good storytelling to show how his life unravels when his autism cannot cope with the change.
Mhm.
Because once everything starts breaking down because of the voice, he can't concentrate because suddenly the regimented numbers, the patterns which we see him uh interact with the world shatter and break. And with that I will say this. The filmmaking aspect of this movie, I do like it.
Mhm.
The way some of the shots are done, the way some of the visuals are done, they're done well. And I appreciate it. Like there's that one point where he's talking with Maggie Gyllenhaal on the bus, and as they're talking, the bus keeps weaving
Mhm.
as they're talking. It was an interesting way to shoot the scene, and I appreciated that because it was mimicking how they're trying to form a connection with each other. One who is a complete extrovert and one who was a total introvert. Again, this is how I saw it, and how the bus is. They're on two separate sides of the bus, and it's never going to quite connect right in
Right.
that moment. So I appreciated scenes
It's
like that.
visual storytelling.
Yeah, and that was good, and I like that stuff throughout the movie. And the one other thing, and maybe you notice I don't. What is with the constant shots of bare feet in this movie? Did you
Was it
notice that?
directed by Tarantino?
No, but I is that it? Is there something about that I missed? Because you get shots of Maggie Gyllenhaal's feet, you get shots of Emma Thompson's feet, you get shots of Dustin Hoffman's bare feet. Is that a thing? I was
Not
looking for
that
some sort of.
I'm aware of. I
Uh,
mean, there is a famous quote like saying, I'm butchering the
Go
hell
ahead.
out of it, but it's something like, you can see the miles a soul has endured by looking at their feet.
Mhm.
It's something like that. So it might be that storytelling quote. There's
My
a lot of classic stuff like that in this
my feet
film.
are flat, and I clip my toenails. What does that say?
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, my feet are pancakes when I step. They just completely flatten out. It's terrible. I have horrible feet. Uh, but so I wanted to know if there was something about the feet. But all right, so back to
It
um
might just be a fetish, just like Tarantino.
okay, okay, I don't know. But Harold, for me, as far as development goes, I appreciate Harold's character development because it's kind of forced on him and it is the story of
Mhm.
him. But I appreciate it. And as I said, Will Ferrell handles it well. There's a really interesting line to me when he returns to Dustin Hoffman, and I think it's the beginning of the third act, and he says, "You look panicked." No, I'm just calm.
Mhm.
I like it that there's the consistency of Harold's character like that. Even in the face of all the stuff, he seems to maintain this level of acceptance and calmness, even though at moments he's freaking out.
It's more like, when he doesn't understand
Mhm,
something, he freaks out, but as soon as he understands it, even if it's bad, he
mhm.
becomes calm.
Yeah,
And
and
that's very much the math analytical autistic side of his brain, at least in my opinion, is
mhm.
that's shining through.
And I like the way the whole evolution of the character, once he starts to live life and not
Mhm.
regiment it, he enjoys life, watching a movie, spending time with his girlfriend, having a conversation with his buddy who wants to go to space camp. And I want to say that as far as minor characters go, I really like his buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
That's a great actor. I know him from Arrested Development. He's great in that. Very different role.
It's a great character because the character is just I got you, bro. And I appreciate the I got you, bro character. All the weirdness going on. I thought for a minute. First of all, I was very pleased that he welcomed him into his home after the apartment got busted open by the crane.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I thought it was going to be some sort of weird moment where they were going to yell at each other. There was going to be some conflict. Nope, we're sort of doing work at the dinner table and then having a sort of autistic nerd conversation.
It was so autistic. Like the moment he's like, "Do I have a superpower?" It's like, "Oh God, this is gonna go terribly." But then it got really sweet, like the conversation about space camp. I really like.
You're good at math. That's not a superpower. That's a skill. You made me invisible, and I appreciated that because I've been in that kind of conversation. So I appreciate. And then he basically just had his back the whole time. He never questioned what was going on. He just let him. And then you saw later on, even Harold's growth affected him because then they're having a conversation at the dinner table, not just one looking at tax sheets or forms and that, while the other one's eating in silence. They're actually living life, and it's a nice little concept theme of, hey, one person's embracing of life affects another person's embracing of life.
It has
Just
ripple
with
effects into the world around you.
yeah, just with Maggie Gyllenhaal's character, whose name I also don't remember. I got to state this though. You probably know where I'm going with this. This was this during the era where everybody was trying to convince us Maggie Gyllenhaal was hot.
Yes, that era was weird. I don't know what people were thinking. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of her movie, The Secretary.
I have seen The Secretary.
I haven't seen it, but
dude, she's naked in 80% of that movie. She's just naked with James Spader. I've seen it, and I mentioned it last night. We were talking about this on Ballbuster because I was talking about the movie I was watching, and Dermy, God bless his retarded heart, walked right into the meme. She was kind of hot in Dark Knight Rises. I just went. We all went, no, Derby. No, you just walked right into the meme.
Well, yeah, he's pretty gay, and she looks like a man, so.
But then he says after it, he goes, right after Dark Knight Rises, she went from hot to 60 years old, and she's not hot anymore. And it's Dermy, you don't understand. She was never hot. Much love, Maggie Gyllenhaal. You are a good actress.
She is a good actress. I've liked her in a lot of her roles.
But
her brother looks more feminine than she does.
I see her brother when I look at her.
Yeah, they're practically the same person, just wearing a wig.
Yeah,
I do love her though. She is a very
good
talented
actress. I don't have a problem with her actress. It's like I don't have a problem with anybody's acting except for Queen Latifah in this movie. Performances
they try to convince us that she's the same person as Katie Holmes. That's when I start to not believe her.
Yeah, I know. And here's the thing: when he first goes to the bakery and the narration of he looked at her long legs, I'm going, no, let's not do this.
I did like her character right off the bat, though. Like, yeah, they went a little bit.
They went a
with her,
little hard with it.
It was funny though, like very much like anarchists gather together. When did that defeat the whole purpose of being an anarchist? Like, they
do come in groups. They do.
I know,
they do
but it's making fun of that because it
know.
doesn't make sense. And yeah,
here's the thing:
whole like taxation is theft. You know,
it's kind of interesting because we're watching this. It's tax season, and my thoughts immediately thinking, I agree with you, honey, because I just did some calculations for somebody about how much they were getting paid. I'm like, yeah, you're losing $300 for your paycheck. Taxation is theft. And now when she started complaining why it was theft, then I'm like, I'm like, okay, now you're losing.
You lose sympathy.
Now you're losing me big time. But and then her whole reason for doing it is right away I knew, okay, there's the love interest of the movie. It was blatant as bright as day. Okay, that he's gonna react to her. They're gonna dance around it for a while.
That's another bro moment because he only got that because his friend said, "Why don't you take the baker? That'll cheer you up." He specifically gave him that audit. The best friend at the IRS.
Right. Yeah. And let's remember, yes, we're dealing with IRS agent, the worst people in the world. These These are the worst people. Now
You got to
now,
feel a little bit dirty.
Harold
being
is
an
a
IRS agent.
Harold is a nice guy. He just has a shitty job.
Mhm.
He has a shitty, horrible job that shouldn't. No, IRS shouldn't exist. There, I said it. We don't need it. Give me a postcard. I'll check a box. This is how much I pay. There you go. No, I don't need to be told any of this stuff. Anyway, their whole relationship, her character, I think their best moment is the cookie scene.
Mhm.
Even though I think it's disgusting to dip a cookie in milk. I think that's disgusting.
Really?
Well, I don't like milk. And I don't want my cookie drenched in something. I want to enjoy the cookie, not the cookie drenched in liquid that
I can understand that
I have
because-
slight intolerance to. So
I can understand that to a certain extent. I'm not a condiment or dipping person. Like
Mhm.
everyone's always like, "Do you want salsa? Do you want hot sauce? Do you want ketchup to dip your fries in?" I don't dip. I
Mhm.
don't do condiments.
I mean, I will if I'm having I'm a sandwich dipper. I will dip a sandwich stuff. Like if I'm having a chicken parm sandwich or like that, I won't put the sauce on the chicken. I'll have the sauce on the side because I want a sauce with each bite, and I don't want it to go everywhere as I'm eating it. Or I'll dip a hamburger because again, I don't want the mustard and the ketchup going everywhere. When I do that, I want each bite to have that flavor and that taste. I'm a dipper in that sense on meats. On meat, yes, but on baked goods, no. No, I don't want my cookie and milk. I know that's heathen talk to some people, but you'll just have to get over it, okay? I don't like my cookie, but that's a great scene because not only is it's character world building, if that's even a way to put this. It's revealing that Harold had a pretty cardboard life where his mom clearly didn't hug him and she didn't make him cookies. And
Which could explain why he's the way he is.
yeah, because we look at his apartment. There's zero accoutrement to it. There's nothing there. It looks like a motel room, honestly.
Mhm.
For a minute I thought, does he live in a motel room? No,
He
that's
has no life outside his schedule.
Yeah. And she does inject life into him. She says, "Eat the cookie, feel good." And then the complete realization that she made the cookies for him.
Mhm.
Now, he is correct, though. He can't accept that as a gift.
It's true.
That would get everybody in serious trouble. And she blows that out of proportion, in my opinion.
Well, at least when I was in the military, we weren't allowed to accept gifts, but the rule was always less than $50 was okay. I don't know if it's different for IRS, but generally less than $50 was deemed okay in most circumstances.
And this is an audit, so there's a lot riding on it to favor swaying. I completely sympathize with him in that moment because I've seen people in those situations where I can't accept this gift. Everybody could get in trouble, and when you're a government official like that, there could be jail time for him.
She does have a propensity to overreact to things. Like I don't think they're going to make a good long-term couple. I don't. She's fun. She's a good fling to get him out of his shell.
I think the possibility is the opposite attract thing, where each one is the thing that has the other is missing. She's the live life thing, and he is take a little bit of order. Take the deduction so you don't go to jail. Because that one moment where he says, I don't want bad things to happen. It would be a bad thing in life if you went to jail because you're just trying to make a point. Please take the deduction. And I think that's a sweet moment right there. And to me, that's why I do think they have a chance, because each one completes the other in a way. He brings a little order to her chaos, and she injects a little chaos to his order and allows him to live life. I like these. I think that it's a standard trope. And again, we're watching a story of a story, so it's clearly there for a reason. Yeah. But her character's not bad. I just think she is obnoxious in the beginning. She's massively obnoxious. Maybe it's on purpose. But and again, Maggie Gyllenhaal does a good job. She performs perfectly fine. Let's talk about Emma Thompson. Let's talk about Emma Thompson. Oh, you go first. You go first.
Well, as I said earlier, she's my favorite part of the movie because, like you said, Will Ferrell's character is a little bit difficult to get immersed in, to feel like he's real to a certain extent, which is the plot of the movie, is figuring out if he's real or not. So that all makes sense. But I feel like she's the one character in the entire film who has agency to a certain extent. Like, yeah, Will Ferrell's able to see the bounds of his universe, and so it's a realization for him, but he doesn't have control beyond what she allows him to a certain extent. So she's, I would say, is more the main character. She's more the inciting incident. And I like a lot of the stuff that goes on with her because she's a writer, so I can relate to her, and I don't have to see myself in her phically to relate to her. But I do see a lot of myself in her as a writer. I can relate to that aspect of it, and a lot of her methods for getting over any story blocks or anything like that, I appreciate, and I like the way that she goes about trying to tell this story, doing extensive research. So I love her character. She's by far my favorite part of it, and the struggles of a writer are very evident within her, and she's unfortunately very isolated because of it. She's chosen her.
You notice her apartment is the exact same as his. Sterile, empty, just the essentials. And that was interesting. I understand what you're saying. And my only problem with her is I think they ham up the eccentric writer thing too much.
I think that's more from isolation. I feel like any writer has the potential to become that without a support system, getting lost in the worlds that they create. Like that not to that extreme, obviously, but that has happened to me when I was living alone during COVID, working on a story when there was nothing really to do besides write. And so I kind of got lost. And obviously she takes it to an extreme, doing this for 10 years. She is a caricature of the writer's zeitgeist and the hypnosis of a good story. But I think it's extreme intentionally.
I was doing a writing thing just about the same time during that period of time, to use a real life example. And I did kind of shut myself off from almost everything for the 4 months when I was doing my last book.
So imagine doing that for 10 years.
But what I did during periods of time, though, is I would stop and I would play a game. But it was a grand strategy game. So I went from doing one world building to have a world built for me where I could completely dump everything that was in my brain out, because I had to build an empire, I had to manage an empire, and doing that kind of work kind of always reset my brain while I was working on it.
It doesn't look like she does anything besides smoking in the way that you're
and it's a
about.
very weird smoking habit too, with the putting it out, spitting on it, and putting it on the tissue, which she even does in the middle of a rainstorm when she's drenched. That cigarette is completely drenched, and yet she spits on
like
it.
You mentioned, like you mentioned, she bears a lot of similarities to Will Ferrell's character. And I think that eccentricity is another example of it. Just these weird little personal quirks and personal habits. She drew inspiration from herself to write Harold, I believe, at least. And so I think that's a great example of that being manifest. She doesn't brush her teeth weird. She puts out her cigarettes weird.
To me, obviously you connect to her a lot more because of how I do, because I know you talking about your writing process. You do a lot of research in that. Whereas when I do stuff, I just make shit up. I just completely make up worlds, make up shit, make up rule system that. So I have a completely different style. So when it came to connecting with her on that level, I didn't get a connection there because my writing process was different. And that's the thing. We all have different writing processes. So that's not
mine is very similar. Going out to a rainy bridge is how I would do it.
It's not a negative. It's just saying I understand it because it's not me. If that makes sense. I understand it because it's not how I do it, but I know it's how it's done in some ways. That's why I knew when she first gets introduced, when she's standing on the roof, I'm thinking, no, this isn't real. She's not actually on the roof getting ready to jump. She is putting herself into this, because we already know that Emma Thompson is the author because we've heard her voice, her very distinctive voice.
Very distinctive.
So we know it's her. Now, of course, I found it interesting that whenever she's writing, the voice is strong, confident, knows what it's doing. But when it cuts to her, it's a disheveled mess of a human being, wearing her pajama top everywhere. everywhere, completely. And this is the thing also, once more, that I can understand. Some writers have horrible social skills, just terrible. I'm not one of them. People love me, but it's
Just not on Twitter.
no. Well, I'm a dick on purpose on Twitter. That's
Yeah,
different.
you do that on purpose.
I am being well. Some of them they deserve it, and some and when it's Dermy, it's just well, fuck Dermy.
It's Dermy, yeah.
But so some writers, a good example, the Jack Nicholas Helen Hunt movie. God, what was that movie? What's that movie called? Shit.
I haven't seen many Helen Hunt movies. I don't know.
Oh, it's the one she won the Academy Award for. God, I suddenly can't remember it. Where he's a writer of romance novels, but he's a complete curmudgeon and he's autistic and things go a certain way. It had Cuba Gooding Jr. in it as the as a gay guy, and that might be actually a thing now. But the writer he's completely antisocial. He hates the world. He doesn't like people. So that is a thing that some writers have horrible social skills. And her in the hospital scene is a great scene. Show me where the dead people, the dying people are. No.
I would want to do it just the way she did. Like I've had the desire to be like, all right, I need to write this emergency room scene. All right, I'm going to go to an emergency room and just watch dying people. I was like, no, that's crazy. That's weird. Not going to do that. Like I do have a voice in my head that stops me from going full her, but I have the potential to be fully her. And that's why I think I relate to this movie more than a lot of people, because I literally see my writing process in her without a little bit of social skills.
And me is the opposite. I could just imagine it. I can fully picture it. I can structure it. I can see the room, this and that. I can drop myself in there. I can put my mind into the character I'm working, and I can transplant it. I don't need to be there to actually get into it, and also I guess I do have that level of antisocial where I don't want to have to deal with people. That's where my antisocial behavior will come in as a writer. I don't want to deal with motherfuckers. I just don't. Just leave me alone. I don't even want to talk to you. I will do the bare minimum of conversation if I have to get past this checkpoint to get someplace. I don't. But I mean, I'll fake it half the time. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, good. Yeah. I'll fake it. But I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to deal with people. But the most fascinating thing to me, though, with her character was, for the moment we see her, even in the video in Dustin Hoffman's office, in that interview, she looks disheveled. You could see the shadows under her eyes.
Is she stammering? She doesn't know what she's going to say.
She's short.
Awkward.
She's short with the interviewer. And her career as Dustin Hoffman's character, the professor tells us, is she's a tragedy author. Everything's a tragedy. And it's beautiful tragedy, that kind of shit. And I'm sure you noticed this. When she goes to visit him, to talk to him about Harold in the third act, she's all cleaned up. She's not disheveled. She's wearing fresh clothes. Her hair is proper. It's not a mess. She doesn't have the shadows under her eyes. And I think that's because she evolved.
Mirrored to Harold's.
Because she decided that when she wrote nothing but tragedy, she was a wreck of a human being. But when deciding to do something hopeful, it changed something in her, and you can see it in her appearance. And even though Dustin Hoffman tries to convince her otherwise, she says, no, it's kind of the way it has to be. And I will change the book to fit this because I think this is the way I'm going to be forward, because I understand it does more to put hope in life and have people who can inspire hope. Because I really like that line in there in the end where it says, I figured it's worth having a man alive in the world who would save a child than not.
Well, yeah, the man who would know he's going to die and willingly accept it to save another life. Isn't that a type of man that we'd want to keep in the world? And it's just a very positive perspective. And I think that's why I dislike Dustin Hoffman's character as a person, but I love the role he plays in it, if that makes sense. Like, I would hate him if I knew him as a person, but I love what he does for the film.
Is
his pretentiousness when it comes to literature has blinded him to the personal nature of it. So he just thinks, oh yeah, it's not a tragedy anymore. It's just sort of okay. Well, are you not feeling hopeful like she is, like the audience watching the movie is? Do you not feel that? Because he's so involved in the dramatic irony, the beautiful tragedy as he sees it as of the original work, that he can't see the world.
He's too wrapped up in the art to realize that
in the art,
that the art isn't the best version of itself, and she makes it a better version.
And he can't ever see that. That's why he can never be a real writer. Because I don't think they mention if he ever writes anything. All he does is do whole lectures and talks and
great
books
papers
on stuff like Little Did He Know. He did a whole class on Little Did He Know.
That hurt my brain when he said that. I was like, who the fuck would take that class?
That's a terrible idea. Yes, omniscient narrator is an interesting thing. I try to avoid it. I find it kind of boring to a certain extent. Like I like whoever the narrator is, whether or not it's the character or the third person narrator, not knowing the same as me. But an omniscient narrator, it just comes across as boring, and I'm disconnected from an omniscient.
It removes stakes.
Yes,
it removes tension.
And so I like the phrase "little did he know," but making that a catalyst for why he decides to help is interesting when it comes to, all right, this person.
That part was interesting when he's doing the whole figuring out, and it shows he has a keen mind, because he's asking a bunch of weird questions, and through the randomness of it, he's able to knock names off of the list of who could possibly be, what kind of genres that, and that was interesting to me as this character goes. And Dustin Hoffman pulls it off because he's good.
He does a great performance, but I think he's the one person in the film of any importance, counting out Queen Latifah, who doesn't have a character arc or change in any way, shape, or form. I don't really think he changes much. That's because he's so wrapped up in the art of it that
there's a weirdness to that. Because when he's in lifeguard duty, and this caught my eye, he's got a plastic bag around the book he's reading when he's on lifeguard duty. And you got to wonder, maybe he doesn't like getting wet or anything like that, because when Emma Thompson's character is doing the final monologue of the movie, even putting nose plugs in, when did he have I feel like there's something missing for his character.
There must have been a deleted scene that said he was afraid of the water, and made a metaphor for him being a lifeguard or something. It was weird. It came out of the blue, and that's a hinting at a character arc that didn't exist. But I think it's interesting how he doesn't change, because if he had been the writer, Harold would have died. Even at he was literally saying, you have to die. He didn't care. He couldn't differentiate between the art and reality. It's the better story if you die.
And that I hate that. I hate that kind of mentality. It's a better story if this happens. How about you let the writer decide if something's story? If you let them create their vision. And now I've had that moment where I think it's better for this character if they die here, but that's because I've built up a particular arc with them. I'm thinking one character in particular right now where it will make sense when it happens, and you'll see it coming, and you won't be surprised when it happens, but it's right. And also, and now of course I'm talking from the science fiction fantasy genre, where you have to kill characters, because otherwise then the story has no teeth to it, because you can't just let everybody survive all the time. That's one of the reasons Star Wars, when they started the New Jedi Order, it was such a profound shift, because Chewie dies in the very first book of that new arc, and everybody had been surviving.
Spoilers.
Oh, come on. It's been over 20 years. Give me a break. Anyway. When you're doing that kind of story, you have to kill characters. But for this type of thing, in this type of story, killing the character maybe isn't the best thing, because maybe tragedy shouldn't be the story you're telling. As we realize in the end, hope maybe should be the story you're telling.
It's clear he only respects tragedies from the way he talks about things. And that's why I think he's so interesting in the movie, is he's the one stalwart. He's the one obsessed with following the lines of plot. And so the comparison is interesting. I would go bananas if he was my college professor. I think this guy is so far up his own ass, he can't tell what makes a story good or not. anymore.
And there are little things that remind you as college professor. I mean, those of you know, you see him holding this particular type of folder binder that all papers are handed to. That little PTSD when I saw that little bit, thinking, oh no, I don't remember that was like
He
being
is
in there.
so important to the movie, though. Imagine if
Oh
Will
yeah.
Ferrell had stayed with the psychiatrist rather
hmm
than going to a literary expert.
hmm I mean,
Would have gone entirely differently.
when I mentioned this last night, Static said, "Oh, wait till you get to Dustin Hoffman. He makes the movie a little bit better." And I said, "Oh, I'm there, and he's a good character. He's all right."
Mhm.
But overall, uh, I could have, and we're at the end. We're at the end of this. I've got nothing to say. I talking about Emma Thompson's character, the way I love my favorite part of her is the evolution. How when she embraces hope, she
Mhm.
looks normal and she behaves a little more normal. Although that one moment in the office where she's looking out the window while he's reading the final pages, I appreciate that because your jitter is like, yeah, I don't really want to be here. I'm looking for something to keep you occupied while waiting for somebody else. I do that all the time.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm constantly waiting for other people. It's terrible. Either way, I appreciate the character work in some cases in this movie rather than the overall movie. Although I like some of the cinematography that's done, some of the camera work, some of
Mhm.
the than that to show don't tell. We know I appreciate good show and tell, and there was good setup and payoff here and there, and then that. But overall, I could have been okay if I've never seen this movie. I would have been fine. It has not really impacted anything. With that being said, let's give final thoughts. So, Jed, it's your week. You can give your final thoughts. Final thoughts first.
Well, final thoughts of this movie. I don't believe it's anything incredibly impressive. It's not a
Mhm.
movie that the majority of people I think should or will rewatch regularly,
Mhm.
but I think it offers a lot of interesting insight and thought-provoking questions that make it worth at least a single watch for most people, at least people interested in
Mhm.
my writing style and a lot of other people's writing style, the mind of a writer. And so, like, I definitely do recommend this film. It's not a perfect film. There's plenty of things like your criticisms. I don't disagree with any of them.
Oh, I almost forgot my biggest problem. Shit. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Finish your thought. I'll go into it in my thing and we can talk about it. I almost forgot it.
Mhm.
Sorry.
But there's a lot of rewrites that need to be done with this movie, especially with
Mhm.
Dustin Hoffman's character and Queen Latifah just being cut out. I don't see the purpose that she served other than have someone that Emma Thompson could talk to,
Mhm.
which is important, but they went way too far with Queen
Yeah.
Latifah, especially telling her what to do. But
Okay.
flaws, but interesting.
Okay. I just remembered. I'm so glad. These are my final thoughts. Okay. We'll tie this to my final thoughts. There's one big thing that jumps out at me that's the biggest inconsistency in the movie. When he's coming, when he's found her, when he's broken the law and used the IRS to track her down, and he's going to the payphone to call her. How did she not know he's calling her before the phone ring? There's something that's
Well,
she's writing the whole
no,
thing. Is she just writing a story? And how is she? If is
he's
she
not
writing?
observant of everything. Remember when he stops brushing his teeth, the
Mhm.
narration stops. When he follows her plot, she knows about it, but him talking to her is never part of her plan. So there's plenty of things he does that she's not
What
aware of.
I guess, but then how is she writing him going to the phone to make the phone call when he was in the IRS office looking her up and she's not aware that she's writing that? I mean, what part of the story then is that connected to in her story?
I always thought it
I
was trying to call Maggie because it was a very pivotal moment for his relationship with Maggie after Dustin Hoffman said, "Ignore her, she's not important anymore." So from her perspective, it's deciding to
it
commit to Maggie.
there's just something
But
about
there's
that that
there's so much that
feels inconsistent right there that if she's writing the story, to me, if I was watching, how does she not know he's about to call her?
Mhm.
Because then she realizes as she's typing, the phone is ringing, the phone rings, she stops, the phone ring again, then it rings, and then she realizes something's going on here. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's something that she's
But she
writing a
doesn't
different.
believe it's real.
Well,
So
she,
just having a phone call,
but maybe at that point she's writing the story she's writing is different than what he's actually doing.
which happened several times.
Yeah, I
Like
understand. Yeah, I
sometimes
understand that.
Mhm,
But that felt like a major inconsistency right there, and it
mhm,
pulled me out of the movie in that moment because I
mhm.
knew what was happening, and then I realized what was happening. Realized, wait a minute, how does she not know it's?
Yeah. I just see it set up throughout the rest of the movie. There are a lot of
Mm.
times where she says he's experiencing something different than he is when he's being aware of what's
Mhm.
going on.
Mhm.
Like, she has no idea that the wrecking crew came through his house, but somehow she starts writing about him being at the friend's place. Where did that transition come in her story? There's a lot of things that she
Yeah.
doesn't know. Like the way he starts running to work is differently one day, but she acts like it's completely the same.
To me, that kind of thing is more part of my problem with the pacing of the movie. Then, as my final thoughts go in, it's a good lead in. Then, the movie to me has some pacing problems in the first, second act, where I feel as though once we start to be led down the road that this is the real world, he is a real person, the connections kind of fall apart for me, and I'm having trouble, as I said earlier, getting attached, and because I think he's fiction, but now I'm being told he's not fiction. But that being said, it's not a terrible story. It just to me kind of plods along. I'm never really engaged. The acting is good. Everybody puts a fine performance. The cast, the exception of Queen Latifah, does a good job. I don't feel like anybody phoned it in. They're all doing a performance. They're all making these characters I can understand, and I not necessarily can fully relate to, but I understand it, and that counts for something. I understand everything they're all going through. I
Mhm.
understand their motivations. I understand their desires, their fears, their wants, and it makes it watchable for me. Am I ever going to watch the movie again? Not unless somebody else makes me. It is not something that's going on my shelf. It's not something I didn't hate it, but I didn't necessarily really enjoy it. I consider it one of these things. Okay, I watched it. I'm not necessarily sure I'm happy I gave it the 2 hours I gave it out of my life, but I didn't feel like I lost anything watching it. It's an okay movie. Like you said, if anything, to have a unique perspective on the writing process or watch a good character evolution movie, I could say go ahead and watch this, and you'll probably get something out of it. And I will say, as you alluded to the fact before we even got to this, this was a good performance of Will Ferrell. It's a tolerable performance by Will Ferrell that I can get behind because he's actually acting. He's not just doing Saturday Night Live yelling at a
Mhm.
screen or retarded character guy, or the stereotype that people keep shoving him into in the current path of his career, retarded dad or retarded boss. I was his performance was a bright spot in this because it was an actual performance, and I can appreciate
Mhm.
that. All right, with that being said, it is your week, so you get to score it first.
So yeah, I totally realize that I have a lot of subjectivity when it comes to this film because of how much I relate to it. So I do try to make sure my score accounts for that at least as much
Mhm.
as I'm able to, because there are plenty of flaws in this movie. I can understand why the majority of people would find it boring, even more so than you did, Adam.
Mhm.
So I think it is not as good as I feel like it is because of how much I enjoy it. So I rate this at a 6.5, and I feel
Oh,
like that's pretty fair overall, because I agree with pretty much all your
yeah.
criticism. Just subjectivity pushes it so much over for me, and it asks such interesting questions
Mhm.
that I feel like that is
Well,
worth adding points on. Just, or maybe 1 point,
I
just for
feel as
saying
though
it's
we
interesting.
forgot to talk about the concept of controlling your own fate. We forgot to talk about that concept. Um, it's an interesting concept. I firmly believe one can control your fate. In fact, I've written on it in the past, and when I do a rewrite, I actually need to do a better job at it. I kind of fumbled my way through it the first time I did it, but it's an interesting concept. Do you
Hmm.
control your own fate? And I would say that, in a sense, Harold did end up controlling his own fate because he had an effect on Emma Thompson's character, the writer.
Yes.
He did change his fate because he changed her fate. And so I think it's either way, I've said my point, and it's one of those rare times where I'm actually a little bit lower than you. 6 out of 10. It's not a disaster of a movie. It's not a bad movie. It's just I wasn't necessarily needing these thought provoking ideas, but
Mhm.
I accept them and I'm willing to talk about them. And I understand that they were presented in a solid way, if not always entertaining in the movie. That being said, that's it. And I do have our movie next week. I announced it last week. I just upgraded it to Blu-ray. I've been waiting to do it for years. I got it. We've done it before. Well, I did it before, but Jed and I haven't. Fifth Element.
Oh, gotta have the booty shot
Oh,
for the cover.
This is a wild movie, man. It's a wild movie. I have so much to say about it, especially being somebody who saw it when it first came out. I won't. That's a discussion when we get to it. I enjoy it. Jed, you haven't seen it before, have you?
I have not.
Has Rachel at least seen it? Tell me Rachel's seen it.
I think so.
Okay,
she
good.
doesn't remember it, but yeah, I do think she's seen it.
Okay, so it's not going to be one of those things where you're both going to watch it at the same time, and I might end up being destroyed. I hope you like this movie. It's like Memoirs of a Geisha. I hope you like this movie. It's so much fun, and it's a crazy world. Yes, Leeloo Dallas multipass. All right, that's it. We're done. Thank you all for joining us to hear across both chats. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channels, and we'll see you guys next time. Until then, guys, take it easy. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Check out my gaming channel at Renaissance Nerd Arcade, and follow me on X Twitter under @TheRedNerd. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy.